Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video we're going to be talking about the guilt surrounding doll collecting. So what do I mean by that? There is so much guilt that I see in the community from different people about collecting dolls from various different perspectives and various different points. So I wanted to kind of talk about those with you guys today and see if any of them ring true for you. So the first one, or I'm going to do this as a top 10, so we're going to count down from 10 to the one that makes me feel the most guilty about doll collecting. But number 10, and I don't experience this, but I see a lot of people that do. Number 10 is partner guilt. So you're a doll collector, you're spending money on dolls, you have this collection of dolls, and your partner is not really supportive. And your partner doesn't feel like you should be having dolls, you know, those are toys, why are you still playing with dolls? And doesn't feel like you should be spending money on that. I see that from a lot of people. Now, I'm very lucky in the perspective that my partner is extremely supportive. He's bought me lots of ball jointed dolls and other types of dolls. And here's a perfect example of that for me is that, you know, Pigeon Doll is releasing a big collection tomorrow. And I wasn't expecting that to happen, but the announcement was just made a couple days ago. And I told my husband, you know, I really would like to get one of those. And he is very encouraging. Go ahead and get one. I think you should try to get one. So I'm lucky in that regard. My partner, though, is also, he is a collector. He collects vinyl records. So he likes to tell people, I collect vinyl too, just a different type of vinyl than my wife collects. So he collects records. He understands that collecting mentality. So as far as that goes, I can't offer much advice about the guilt for that. But my perspective is if all of your bills are paid and your needs are being met and you're not going into huge debt over your collection, if you're not going into debt at all over your collection, I don't think your partner really has a right to make you feel guilty about it. Now, if it is impacting your household finances, I do think you have to be self-reflective and say, you know, maybe I shouldn't be going into debt and running up credit cards and things like this for this collection. And so I don't really know because, like I said, it's not something that's come up in my marriage, but I see a lot of people that talk about how their partners are not supportive. So that's number 10 on my list is the partner guilt. Number 9 on the list is getting hard to find dolls, and I see this a lot, and this is something that I do experience some feelings of guilt over. So I have some very hard to find dolls. One of them is this beautiful tan Phoebe by Nikki Britt. I recently got, if you guys missed the video, I got Chitose, the Smart Doll Chitose, who is hard to find. I decided I wanted one, and I actually got one within a week of deciding that I wanted her. But the thing that happens is there are people out there that may be looking for these dolls and they maybe have been looking for a long time. It took me a week from when I started looking for her to when she arrived at my house. And so there is some guilt about that. You know, I have a very wide net of dolly friends and doll people that are, you know, looking out for me. And so sometimes when stuff comes available, it gets offered to me, or people, because I have such a wide net, people are always, you know, sending me things. And so I'm aware of a lot of things that happen or when things go up for sale and stuff like that. But it can feel very guilty when, you know, you get something that's really nice and hard to find and somebody says, oh, I've been looking forever for that and I've never been able to find it. It's, you know, it's not fair, that sort of thing. And I do think that stinks, because if I had been looking for something for a very long time and then I see somebody get it right, you know, right, like had started looking for it and just got one, you know, I would feel disappointed too. And so I understand that's a real thing. So there is some guilt about that. You know, you feel bad when your friends or when people that you know can't get the hard to find dolls, or that for whatever reason, you know, they're not able to find them. You know, I spend a lot of time building up a doll community, and looking at Instagram and things like that, and I work with a lot of different people to do different things. And so I think that's just something that, you know, for me, that's helped me a lot because I have so many contacts in the doll community. But you do feel guilty, like, because when somebody wants something so bad, and I know that feeling of disappointment. I've been there before. There's some hard to find items out there that I'd love to have that I've never even shared with you guys on YouTube because I don't want the extra competition when the time comes and I try to get it. Because there's some things that are like that. The competition is so intense that, you know, I don't share it publicly. But you feel guilty about it because you want everybody to be able to have their dolly dreams come true. For the most part, for me, you know, mine are, my dolly dreams are coming true. So it can be a little bit guilty if you get something, especially if it's a friend of yours. Like if you have a close friend that, you know, really wanted something, or somebody that you speak to a lot in a doll group that really wanted something and they weren't able to get it and you were. Hopefully they don't make you feel guilty about it and they don't add on to that already, that feeling of, you know, why did I get this and they didn't kind of thing. But that's a real guilt thing. It's a real thing to think, you know, there's so many people that really want this doll and I'm the one that's been fortunate enough to get the doll. And so because of that, I try to take really good care of them. You know, I try to share them as much as I can and stuff like that. Number 8. It's very easy to feel guilty about the number of dolls you have. I feel guilty about that quite frequently, actually, and it's going to tie into several more items on this list. But, you know, you look at, there's a lot of different things that kind of play into that. Number one, I think about the environmental impact and the environmental footprint that my doll collecting has on the world, and it's probably not great. You know, resin is not, you know, the most environmentally friendly material, not to mention the fact that most of them are made in China. So then you've got all this shipping, you know, back and forth across the world and packing materials and things like that, and the toxic Mr. Super Clear that's used to make their faces. Like, that's something that I feel really guilty about. Obviously not guilty enough to stop collecting, but it is something that I do think about. So I'm not ignorant to the fact that, yes, there is a big environmental impact with these dolls. Now, to kind of offset that guilt, you know, I try to do things better in my daily life, you know, like recycling and not using straws, you know, telling them at restaurants I don't want a straw, I don't want any plasticware, you know, just trying to do different things, trying to buy things from sustainable sources. We recently at my house, we switched from using for our dish sponges, they make a dish sponge that's made out of coconut husks now, instead of like whatever that wool, that steel wool is that they make sponges out of, that's not biodegradable or anything like that. So trying to make small changes like that to try to offset a lot of the impact that my dolls have. Not only that, but, you know, just, you know, I do have a lot of dolls. I know other collectors that have more dolls than me, and I know other collectors that don't have as many. And so a lot of people will tell me, and this is kind of part of that guilt, oh, I can't keep up with you, Allison. And it's like, I'm not showing you these dolls. I'm not showing you guys these dolls because I want anybody to keep up with me. I'm just showing you so you can make an informed decision about what do you want to spend your money on, because, you know, there's so many choices out there, and there's so many things that you can invest your money in. And so that's more of my angle of why I show you all these different types of dolls. Obviously, you know, I do buy a lot of dolls and I buy ones that I like. But, you know, you can start to feel guilty about the number of dolls you have, not only from the environmental impact, but when people say things like that to you, like, oh, I can't keep up with you, or you have so many dolls, how do you do it, that sort of thing. But really, like I said, my point is to share them with you guys so you can make an informed decision about the dolls that you want to buy. So that's one of those things it's a really, like, that one's tough, because I really do have a lot of guilt when I look at the number of dolls in this room and think, wow, like, I really have a lot of dolls. And obviously I can't spend time with them every day. You know, I would like to be able to say every doll every day gets a change of clothes and a photograph and stuff like that, but that is just not feasible. You know, I look at them all every day because I'm in this room working and I'm in this room doing different things, but I don't actually get to interact and play with them all every day. I really admire people that have just 1 or 2 dolls and that's it, and those dolls have big collections, and those are the dolls that they really just stick to and photograph and do things for. I think that's so admirable. You know, I don't ever see myself being able to do that, but I think it's a really cool thing that people are able to do it. Because not only, like I said, it reduces the environmental impact, but then you do get to spend more time with that doll. So I feel really guilty about the number of dolls that I have and like not being able to spend the amount of time that they all deserve devoted to each one, and also the environmental impact, like I said. Number 7 on the list kind of plays into number 8, which I call it being greedy. And so what do I mean by being greedy? I have certain artists that I really love and that I want their full sets, and I would buy all of them if I could afford it. Of course I can't, but I really want to get in and get their full sets. So for example, I've got a Pasha Pasha full set already. I want to get another one. You know, I know there's a lot of other people out there that want to get one too. And what I could do is sit back and say, okay, I'm gonna let somebody else buy this so they can have the chance. But the reality is I know I'm gonna go for the one I want when it comes available. And so hopefully I'm just first. And so another example of that is the blue smart dolls, like the Interstellar blue smart dolls. I had said I'm only gonna get one. And then I decided, you know what, I want one of each. I want 2 of each beverage color, which Interstellar Blue is not really a beverage. We could just start calling that blue milk, of course. But anyway, when Anomaly Zombie dropped, like I saw Anomaly Zombie at the Smart Doll meet, and I was like, I need another blue girl, and I want her. And so I got her as well. And so a little bit of that is being greedy, because there's people out there that haven't been able to get any blue Smart Dolls at all, and they want one. And I bought another one even though I already have one, and so I do feel guilty about that. Like seriously, feel a real amount of guilt over that. Not enough to stop me from doing it, but I do think about those things and I do feel bad about it. For example, the Smart Doll Shiki, though, I did good. I'm proud of myself. I carded Shiki when she was available, and I said to myself, Allison, you are not an Idolmaster fan and you don't even know who she is. Why would you buy this and take it away from a real fan? And I didn't. I abandoned the cart and I let somebody else have her. So I felt good about that. But you know, one of the things that I've always said, and we've talked about at different doll shows and stuff, is like all's fair in love and dolls. Like when it comes to dolls, whoever's first and whoever grabs it first, that's the way it is. And I think that's kind of the way it has to be, because if you try to take a lot of other people's feelings into account, and even when you and a friend are up for the same doll, you know, it's tough. So it's like, you know, I haven't actually been in that position where like one of my close friends and I were after the same exact doll. So I'm lucky in that regard. But, you know, just thinking about things from that perspective, like it does make me feel guilty, but not guilty enough. I felt guilty enough to not buy Shiki. So I'm proud of myself for that, but not guilty enough. Like I'm going to go for a Pasha Pasha full set when one comes up that I want, even though I already have one. I went for the other blue Smart Doll. There's lots of examples of times when, you know, I'm going to go for artist full sets. Oh, Hush from Napalm Dolls. I've got 3 of those on the way, and 2 of them are artist full sets. And I felt bad. I asked the artist, Gwendolyn, I said, you know, I know that there's other people out there that want these, but, you know, if nobody wants to buy that, I'll buy 3 of them. And she allowed me to buy all 3. So, you know, that's greediness on my part, but it's also, that's how we collectors are. You know, you want to collect one of each type or one of each tone or whatever. So, or 2 of each tone in the Smart Doll thing. I feel like I'm rambling here, but that is one of the serious, levels of guilt that I have around doll collecting. Number 6 on my list is supporting one artist over another. There are so many amazing doll artists out there. I wish I could support every single one of them, but I can't. I just financially can't. Space-wise, you can't. And you know, you fall in love with a collection and you want more of that same specific collection, so it's hard to do. There's been so many artists over the years that like pre-orders will open at the same time for this doll, and you have to choose between which doll are you going to order. Are you going to order this one or this one? I always feel bad about that because one of my #1 goals with this channel and with, you know, everything around dolls is I like to support artists. I like to support artist dolls, and I want to be able to, you know, just support artists. I mean, there's no better way to say it, right? And so I always feel guilty. There's a couple artists out there whose work I don't have yet, and I like their work. I'd love to give their work a try, but the timing never works out quite right because something else comes up that I really want, and so I have a lot of guilt about supporting one artist over another. I will even go so far as to dive deep, like, into the artist's background and kind of figure out, you know, is this artist a nice person, or, you know, are there any issues with this artist, in case, you know, that helps me make a decision over one artist versus another. But, you know, it's just really tough for somebody like me when I want to support artists and I want to give that, you know, to support somebody, you talk with your pocketbook. That's what we used to say, or talk with your wallet. You spend the money, and that gives them the support. You can also share their stuff, and that supports them as well to help get the word out when pre-orders are open. But I do feel a lot of guilt about not being able to support all the artists. I just can't buy all the dolls. Nobody can. Well, there might be some people out there that do buy all the dolls. I don't know. I'm sure there are a few, but, you know, I can't do it as much as I'd like to do it. So that's one thing for me is always especially when two artists that I really like are opening a pre-order at the same time, and I can't do both. Like, I would like to do both, but you just can't do both. There's a lot of guilt for me around that because, you know, especially if it's an artist I haven't experienced their doll firsthand. It's like, you know, they really deserve for me to give that doll a chance, but I'm not able to do it at the time for whatever reason. So that's one for me that's huge. That's a really, really big one, is, you know, having to pick and choose which artists I'm going to support. #5 is not bonding with a doll. I feel very guilty when I buy a new doll and I don't bond with it. You know, for whatever reason, you can buy a doll and you just end up not bonding with them, and then you have to sell them. And so you don't have to sell them, but I do. If I don't bond with a doll, there's no point in me keeping it in my overcrowded room as it is. I might as well sell it and buy something else. So a great example of that were the OB11 dolls. I bought a couple of OB11 dolls maybe a year or two ago. I don't know, probably 2 years ago, because I don't think I bought them during the pandemic. And I tried them out, and they just weren't my thing. Like, I just didn't bond with them. I ended up selling them both because, you know, they were small, and it just wasn't my thing. They're very cute, but when I got them here, I realized that they just weren't kind of the things that I was interested in. There's been a lot of other dolls that I haven't bonded with over time. There's been dolls that I have bonded with, but for one reason or another, you end up selling them. But anyway, I always feel guilty about that. Like, when I get a brand new doll and it comes into my house and I play with it and I really like it and I see that it's a nice piece of work and all this, but for whatever reason, I just don't feel that sort of attachment to it, and I don't feel that sort of level of, I don't know, the level of excitement and things for redressing and photographing and doing those sorts of things with the dolls. I do feel a lot of guilt over that. I hate buying a doll and getting it and not bonding with it. And I feel bad for it because I know it's not the artist's fault, it's not the doll's fault. It's just for whatever reason in my own heart and mind, I'm not bonding with that particular doll. #4 on my guilt list is changing taste. I feel really guilty when my taste changes. And what do I mean by that? For example, for me, I had a big change in taste maybe around 2017, 2018, where before I was collecting more childlike dolls, and I really liked the younger, kind of USD, immature bodies, even, you know, toddler age dolls, where now my taste has completely changed. I much prefer a mature doll. I almost always go with a mature doll. I buy very few immature young dolls anymore. And I feel guilty about that because there's nothing wrong with those dolls. There's nothing wrong with that age range of doll. There's nothing, you know, it's just not my taste anymore. My taste has changed a lot. And so it's interesting the way that people will ask, do you like this? Do you like that? Do you like this? And I don't like to tell people flat out, you know, no, I don't like that, and I don't collect it, because I don't want people to feel like, you know, when people ask me that, I feel like they're looking for validation for their own collections. You don't need anybody's validation for your own collection. Whatever you like to collect, I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's great, because there are so many different types of dolls out there for everybody. But my taste did take a huge shift, you know, in the last couple of years. And part of that guilt comes from I'm not supporting all of the same artists that I originally was when I started in the hobby. I still support a lot of my favorites, but, you know, with me not buying as many, like tinies, for example, I really don't buy tinies anymore. It's very infrequently that I buy a tiny. I also don't buy immature dolls very often anymore. So I have some of that guilt, like, and I'm probably flattering myself to think that an artist would even notice something like that, but you do feel bad, like if you had been very supportive of one artist in the past, and now that your taste has changed like mine has, and so you're supporting a lot of artists who make more mature dolls that are different. So, do you hear that? We have a visitor. Did you realize I was making a video without you? Come on. So anyway, that's one thing that I feel quite guilty about is, you know, the changing taste. I shouldn't feel guilty about that. Like, when I think about it, it does seem very silly to even feel guilty about something like that, because why should I? You know, people's taste does change, and I've seen people say things about it in different forums, and I always say people's taste change. It is what it is. And especially like if you've pre-ordered something and the pre-order takes a year and a half or 2 years to get to you, by the time that 2 years has elapsed, your taste may have completely changed, and it may kind of be like the previous when you don't bond with the doll because your taste has changed so much. And so I think a lot of people feel guilty about that, and some people in the community will actually make a person feel guilty. They'll say snarky things when somebody just gets a pre-order in and turns around and sells it, but they take so long that I feel like that's a totally valid thing. It happens all the time. It's happened to me before where I pre-ordered a doll, you know, probably a year, 2 years in advance, and the doll waited a year and a half, 2 years to get to me, and by that point I was no longer really interested in that doll. My interest had changed. So that's one I do feel guilty about, and I think other people do too. I've seen a lot of people talk about that one, so I think it's like a bigger one in the community that more people feel guilt over. But it is tough when your taste changes and you find yourself supporting different artists than maybe you were originally supporting when you came into the BJD hobby. Number 3, and this is a huge one for me, is selling. I always feel guilty about selling an artist doll because that artist has put so much time into the doll, and they have, you know, made it, and I have gotten it, and for whatever reason I decide to sell. That does make me feel very guilty. But kind of all of the things that we've talked about before, like the number of dolls that I have, changing taste, you know, supporting one artist over another, you know, it's tough. You have to make those choices, and sometimes for me, I have to sell a doll. And so you guys would not believe. So I sold Quetzal. You may have seen that video where I talked about why I wanted to sell her and why she was under consideration for selling. You would not believe the number of people who messaged me on Instagram and wanted to know why I sold her, which I already explained on YouTube, and wanted to know how much I sold her for. That's kind of rude. You shouldn't ask people that. You know, that's between me and the buyer. If I didn't publicly put it out there for sale with the price on it, you know, that's really not, I don't know, it was kind of shocking to me how many people messaged me to ask that, especially when I already explained on YouTube why she was under consideration for being sold. But anyway, that doesn't help either when you're selling off part of your collection, which if you guys noticed a couple weeks ago, I did put a lot of stuff up for sale for Instagram. I sold quite a few dolls. But the reason for that is, you know, I have my eyes on something else. I had a lot of dolls I needed to downsize. I've I've got incoming dolls. As a matter of fact, while I was making this video, another doll was just delivered. So I have to make space for the new dolls coming in, and also I want to have money actually to buy a Pasha Pasha full set. So that's, you know, kind of the whole idea behind selling all these dolls and downsizing a little bit. I feel like I'm downsizing, but more dolls have come in. But it does give you a lot of guilt when you sell an artist doll, because, you know, some artists do get very offended when you sell their dolls because they, you know, they feel like, you know, their dolls should be kept in your collection forever. And while in a perfect world, you know, I would love to do that, I think a big part of doll collecting is buying and selling. And some people, I've had people tell me quite snarkily, I never sell my dolls. That's great. You know, I don't have the space and the finances to be able to never sell a doll. You know, I would just have to, I guess, stop collecting if I didn't sell anything, because I just wouldn't have the space for it. But I do have intense feelings of guilt about selling artist dolls, because, you know, there's nothing wrong with those artists, there's nothing wrong with the doll, but it's just time for them to move on and make space for something else. So that's a big one for me, that I feel anytime I sell an artist doll, I feel an intense amount of guilt about it. And maybe I'm just weird, maybe that's a flaw for me, but I do feel that way when I'm letting an artist doll go. Okay, we're coming up on the top 2 things that make me feel guilty in the doll collecting hobby. And number 2 is the lack of proper display space for the dolls. You guys have seen my doll room tour. You know that my dolls are displayed in IKEA bookshelves and in this built-in shelf I have on my wall. And I have some dolls that I really feel like they deserve their own, you know, glass case on a pedestal that's lighted by themselves to be showcased in that manner. And I don't have them showcased that way. I have a lot of guilt about that, so I feel bad. A lot of people were asking me for so long to do a doll room tour, and it's like I feel kind of bad about it, because I have these gorgeous works of art and they're not displayed in a manner that I feel like, I mean, I feel like they're museum pieces, and I feel like they should be displayed as museum pieces. Unfortunately, my home is not a museum. I just have one room to put them in, and so that's the way I do it. So what I try to do to kind of offset that guilt is, you know, I try to take them down and give them the individual time, and, you know, pose them and try to do pictures with them individually. But I just really wish I could display them better as museum pieces. You know, maybe one day there will be the Muñecas, Poupées, and Dolls doll museum, but unfortunately doll museums around, even in this country, they just don't do very well. There was one I saw not too long ago. I think it was going up for sale and it was going to close, and you know, it's just not something there's a ton of interest in, is having doll museums. But anyway, that was kind of a side quest there. But I feel really guilty that I have some of these really beautiful, gorgeous pieces of artwork, and they're just kind of stuck on a shelf here in my room. And I'm aware of that. And I hate for artists to if they were to watch one of my doll room tour videos and think, oh, my doll's just sitting there on that shelf out in the open, you know, whatever. It's just, that's the way I'm able to kind of put them up. And I do take them down and appreciate them individually and look at them individually, but I'm just not, I don't have that kind of museum quality display space for my dolls. I really wish that I did. And that's one of my huge guilt factors with my dolls, is that I really wish that I had better display options for some of the really nice art pieces that I have, that I don't have that kind of option. Because, you know, if I got rid of all my dolls except 1 or 2, I could do that, but that's not something I'm willing to do. So I'm not willing to reduce their numbers so much that I only had a couple dolls to display. So right now, that's kind of, you know, the predicament that I'm in, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. I plan to you know, live in this house for the rest of my life. This is going to be my doll room for the rest of my life. I don't see me ever stopping collecting, because I've always collected. So I think that's always going to be something that I feel guilty about, is that I have some beautiful pieces that they're not displayed in the manner that they deserve to be displayed in. But I do love them the amount they deserve to be loved. I really do love and appreciate the pieces that I have so much, and I'm really grateful to the artists who created them and allowed me to purchase them and bring them into my home. I just wish I could really put them all on a pedestal in a glass case with beautiful lighting and have somebody, come by with Windex every day and clean the case up. But that's just not feasible for me. But I do feel really, really guilty about that. Okay, number one thing that makes me feel the most guilty about doll collecting is the amount of money that I spend on my collection. And I know so many other collectors feel the exact same way. I've had talks with a lot of people about it. Doll collecting is a luxury hobby. It costs a lot of money, especially when you're buying, premium ball jointed dolls, and when you're buying like smart dolls, for example. The clothing is not cheap. The wigs are not cheap. Shoes aren't cheap. The dolls themselves are not cheap. This is a very expensive hobby. And I do feel guilty about the amount of money that I have invested in this hobby. It is, it's a lot. To try to make myself feel better about that, I remind myself that I save a lot of money in my 401k. We have an emergency fund, and I don't go into debt for my hobby. I think those are important things for every doll collector to consider. If you're going into debt for the hobby, you probably should step back. I am a financial person, though. I like numbers. I like money. I think about stuff like that a lot. So I don't think any doll item's ever worth going into debt over. When I do go through a period of guilt thinking about how much money I've spent on dolls, I'll often sell a lot of them. So going back to the dolls that I recently sold a couple weeks ago, I know that I want to buy a Pasha Pasha full set coming up in the next couple months. I don't know when, because I don't know when she's going to release them. That's kind of randomized. But I know that I would like to get one. But rather than spend more money and get one, I kind of sold some dolls off, and I'm kind of holding on to that money so that when that becomes available, if I'm able and fast enough to grab it, that lessens my guilt load a little bit because I sold some dolls to buy that. So I feel like that is my number one thing. And I feel like all of the kind of things we talked about before, like the partner guilt, supporting one artist over another, all these sorts of things, they kind of tie into the number of dolls that you have. That all kind of ties into feeling guilty about the amount of money that has been spent on your collection. The good thing about dolls is that most dolls retain their value. Most artist dolls do anyway. I know my smart dolls for the most part retain their value. Now, when doll collecting, I've seen doll collecting go through a slump when those dolls don't retain value. One doll that I can really think of about like that are the Annette Hemstedt dolls that Mattel made with Annette. I remember those being back in the 90s. I want to say $600 or $700 in the Sears catalog, when I was looking through the wish book as a kid. And then now, today, you can get those on eBay for under $200. So they really did not hold their value. But that does happen with every type of doll over time. There could be a slump. Not every doll. I'm not saying every doll depreciates, but there could be a slump for different types of dolls. But for the most part, most of my dolls do pretty well to retain their value, so that's good. So I try to make myself feel less guilty about that. And then also, I know that if I got into some really serious emergency situation, if I had to sell my dolls, I could. If it was a life or death kind of situation or something that my insurance would not cover for whatever reason, that I could sell a large majority of my collection off. And they're pretty liquid. They sell pretty fast. So the things I sold last week, the longest that one sat there was for 2 days. So that stuff is pretty liquid. It sells pretty easily, especially if you price it right. So I feel like that is my biggest. Sometimes I'll sit and think, I should not be spending money on dolls. But at the same time, I tell myself, well, you're saving money. You're saving enough money for retirement. You've got enough money for an emergency fund. All your bills are paid. You're not going into debt. Who does it hurt? The two things I like to spend money on are travel and dolls. And so, I drive a very old car. My car is 11 years old. It's been paid off for a long time. My house is paid off. I don't have kids, so I don't have a lot of the expenses. I don't have student loans. I don't have a lot of the expenses that other people might have. So that's kind of where my money goes, is dolls and travel. But anyway, that one's a huge guilt factor for myself, and I know for a lot of other people. Well guys, if you sat through this whole video, I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear below in the comments, what is your #1 guilty feeling that you get about your doll collecting? Like, what makes you feel guilty? Or maybe you don't feel guilty about any of it, which is great. You know, I aspire to not feel guilty about anything I do with my collection or in my collecting, but unfortunately, I'll probably always have that little bit of guilt somewhere for the various things that we discussed today. But I really would love to hear your perspective and what makes you feel guilty about collecting below in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons: Lindsay S., Leah W., Jenny C., Doreen Z., Janice H., Mercedes W., Angela E., Cindy K., Bear Sunflower, Diane B., Kelly L., Cindy L. Your support means so much to me and helps me continue bringing you great dolly content. For more details on how you can become a patron, please check the link in the video description. Thank you.